Yeah, it's official. We are here for our virtual book club again with our incredible guests, Jaymee Go and Joyce Chng, who are the editors of our fabulous anthology that we read this month, The Sea is Ours. Welcome, both of you. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thank you for having us. Hi. Thank you for the invite. And
You are so
we're having
welcome.
to chat about what time this meeting would have been before confirming anything. Everything at once. It's okay.
Thank you.
Well,
Thank
no, that's on us though. That's on us.
That's
We should have been a bit more specific about when and where in space and time we were.
You know, the time zone thing is so tricky, and
Yes.
it really leans into some of the time travel experience and some of the weird science of steampunk. And
Yeah.
I like making a lot of jokes about it, but it is a challenge and it can make us feel more distant from other parts of the world. And it can lead to a little bit more myopia, I think. But
Mm.
you have both worked so hard in your steampunk work, in your literary work of all flavors, because you do more, far more than steampunk. But you've always been part of that push to remind people that the world is a complete whole, that there are more peoples than the Western Hemisphere, that it's not a Eurocentric space, and you are bringing us those stories and reminding us of those connections, which is such a gift. Could you talk a little bit about how you, let me ask a really soft question to start. Just break it down into a nutshell. How did you get into steampunk and decide to start this creative process using steampunk as your lens?
Oh, I have a very specific story about how I fell into steampunk, actually. And it was actually through Aileen the Peacemaker at Diana Foe.
Yes.
And at that time, I was reading a couple of like web comics that had that steampunky feel. And one of them was definitely Girl Genius. And I was like, oh, this is a cool aesthetic, but like it's just, it's clearly all set in Europe because that's where all the steam tech was. I just didn't really think about it until it was very specifically the Asian Women Blog Carnival. Do you guys remember blog carnivals? I remember blog carnivals. They were fun. Nobody does them anymore because we're not doing blogs. So she had written a post about doing Asian steampunk and a bit about like the assumptions that go into steampunk and what happens when she says, "Oh, I am trying to do Asian steampunk," and I was just like, "Oh, I feel like I've had a version of that conversation like in my head." And so I like emailed her, being all like, "This is so interesting. Like, let's talk a bit about it." And we ended up like just writing each other like long theses about the possibilities of Asian steampunk. Um, and just culminated in like us meeting up and like me realizing, oh, that's actually an entire community. I think all of us have that experience of like, oh, like this aesthetic that I like, there's an entire community of people who love this same aesthetic.
Yeah.
I should like gear up and join them. Um, and at that time, I was also I was done my first degree. I was kind of like bouncing around jobs, trying to like figure out what to do with the rest of my life because I was in my 20s. Um, and I was just like, I actually want to talk about steampunk. And I want to do research on it. I want to like think about steampunk through a post-colonial lens. And I started writing Silver Goggles, my post-colonial steampunk blog. I still remember Silver Goggles. Yeah. I mean, it's still there. I've never deleted it. Yeah. And I got into grad school just so I could talk about steampunk and post-coloniality. And after I was done that master's thesis, I realized that the community had started running with multicultural steampunk in like ways that I was just like, this feels like wrong. And it's not wrong, but it's like the way that we've seen multiculturalism commodified again and again, taken up in and done the same way into steampunk, which is very easy to do, right? Because like steampunk very much is about deconstructing the present in different ways and reconstructing it into very piecemeal pastiche kind of ways. Which is great until you just have more white people running around dressed as people of color or like dressed from other cultures. And it still makes people of color uncomfortable. And I'm like, why is that? And so I went on to do my PhD at the University of California, thinking through steampunk through a critical race theory and lens instead, and then ended up in whiteness studies. And so that's what my dissertation ended up being about. And this project, the Sea is Ours, just came to me as kind of like a natural. It was a thing that Joyce and I had been bouncing about for a while.
Wow.
And then Bill Campbell of Rosarium was like, I like the cut of your jib, and I like the idea of this project. Like, I'll give you the platform, and you put together the book. And we're like, sweet, let's do it.
In between the two years, there's so many things as well. Right?
Yeah. So that is like how I ended up in the project. I don't remember how Joyce ended up in the project.
I think I got to know about steampunk through you. And then through Eileen, the peacemaker. And then I started realizing, oh, I like steampunk too. But then I was thinking, how can I incorporate steampunk into, like, say, Southeast Asia? Because I'm in Southeast Asia. I'm like,
you were full-time in Southeast Asia, and I was still in Canada at the time.
How are we going to, like, incorporate steampunk into our writing, our style? And we came up with Steampunk Nusantara as well.
Yeah, we created a dream with community called Steampunk Nusantara. Nusantara refers to the Southeast Asian, maritime Southeast Asian region. It's an old Malay, is it an old Malay word? It's an old Malay
term.
Yeah. And I think it might even predate the Arabian traders who brought Islam to the region. So we started this dream with community just to have talk about ideas, what might we find, what kind of artifacts might we find in Southeast Asia steampunk, like what kind of like texts might we find, what kind of histories might we find, objects and things like that. And we framed it as like, there's this warehouse of weird steampunky things, and we are busy cataloging them.
Yes.
And so people would just kind of like come up with like catalog items of like things that might have existed in this alternate history, steam-powered Southeast Asia. And while I was doing that, I was like kind of researching like, okay, so if part of the history of Southeast Asia is the Islamicization, from Arab traders, like what would they have brought in that would have generated a technological boom here? So that's how my Southeast Asian, like my Steampunk Nusantara short story series, the Peranakan Steampunk series came to be, where the one pivotal character is a merchant woman. And she runs away from home to avoid getting married to a Portuguese because she's from Malacca. And she first goes, I can't remember if she first goes to China or if she first goes to Arabia, but she goes to either place. And like, this is like at the height of the golden age of Islam. And she just, instead of the golden age of Islam, like, like going into decline, like the text still continues, and she brings home that steam technology, because the first mention of steam turbines is actually from Arabia. It's from an Arabian philosopher, and he called them the spiritual engines. Al-Rahania. And so that's how I was also thinking very much about what the language of steampunk would sound like in Malay, right? And so instead of saying airship or saying dirigible or saying what was the other term for it that we use? Well, a bunch of other terms. I was like, okay, we would call it the Rohani because it exists between the land and the sky, and it's powered by the spiritual steam engine. Yeah, Perahu is a boat. Yeah, it's a little rowboat. Yeah. So for me, it's like trying to think through language as a way to really root the setting, the aesthetic in the setting was really important for me, and that's part why I wrote a whole series of short stories, kind of like exploring that. Yeah. What about you,
I
Joyce?
think for me it's like I started to look at steampunk like how kind of alternate history. Like what if the Chinese, like in China, like they actually had airships, air warships that can actually like go from sea to air. And there is like there was my own version of steampunk is that golden Chausonis? No, no, it's an old it's an old 19th century travelogue that's like centered around Southeast Asia, but it's like written in such a way that it's like Southeast Asia is very it's exotic, very interesting. The way I see it is that I will kind of reflect on it. It's a reflection.
Okay.
Yeah. It's a in a way it's a battle. It's a kind of like more diverse imagining in my mind how steampunk should be. It's like airships and water as well. It's like how do we incorporate water, wind, into steampunk as well? Because it's like mine is just more japalanga, like more like a meat smash as well. Yeah.
Something that I recall, Joyce, that you've talked about a lot on your social media and your writings about your work and on your Patreon, you talk a lot about hope punk and about this sort of more ecological approach and thinking about hearing you talk about some of your inspiration from steampunk recalls me to this more holistic view you have of an alternate history. Do you and you've both touched on this a little bit that you were inspired to create the anthology and to start writing your own. Oh my gosh. You know what?
What?
Pardon me. Pardon me. I'm so sorry. I can't get back there. We're just here now. Thank you, Bill. I'm just Jocelyn today. I'm sorry, everybody. I was so excited and so wrapped. I dropped my character. It has literally never happened. I was just too enchanted by both of you, so I apologize.
It's okay. You were so taken in that like you dropped your persona, your facade. I mean, that's flattering.
Yeah, I was just so enchanted. So my apologies, everyone. Now you can see the great and powerful Oz is really just a weird girl in the United States. So my apologies. But here we are. So where was I? So could you talk a little bit about, I guess where I was going was you write with a point and you've created with a point, and that you were inspired because you saw this need to be more holistic in the approach to the stories and to also speak from an own voice's perspective. Do you feel that you had an impact on the conversations around steampunk and that you shifted some of that discourse about what steampunk is and can be? And did that feel like an opportunity for you not only to make a better space for yourselves, but to also elevate some other voices?
I'm very pessimistic, and I'm going to say no.
Okay.
I'll be the cautious optimistic.
Like that's why I did my entire PhD. My entire PhD is how like as much as we want to say, oh yeah, steampunk is more diverse now. Until we see more voices of color telling such stories and being taken on without being seen as these like, oh my gosh, like these are so special kind of like moments, then it's not we have the work is not done. The work is not done. And also because my entire a huge thrust of my dissertation is analyzing the aesthetic itself and what gets read onto the symbols that are used to signify the aesthetic a lot. And a lot of what gets signified tends to be tied to a very Eurocentric point of view, and in particular, a very white point of view of how to exist in the world. And like, I feel like that these ways of being are not specific to whiteness, but at this point of time in history, like I had the argument that there are three tropes or three themes very strongly associated with steampunk, which is the idea of adventure, going off, exploring new worlds, the idea of mad science, which is, and like science is, one is about discovering the world, but also about controlling it, right? Like mad, we say it is mad science specifically because we recognize the immorality of the scientists to try to control things that should be left to God, or how whatever it is that you wish to say. And the third one, which I think no one has ever really talked about, is that of the promenade. Which is we dress up to look beautiful and we go on a walk to show off how beautiful we are, right? And that is very much tied into the colonial project. All three are very much tied to the colonial project.
It is true.
Where, you know, like you dress up, like these colonial women would dress up in all these like corsets to show how different they are from the native women who were loose and therefore like, you know, not restricted by the corset, for example. And so I speak on those three things, and I feel like those are still very much tied to the steampunk scene in many ways. And like there's nothing very specifically white about these three themes. I think that they can be taken up by people of color and put in different settings, but we have not really seen that a whole lot. And not only that, but like I also don't want to be like the one decisive voice of how to do it. And that's why we have anthologies, and that's why we encourage different stories, right? Like that's part of like the condition of being Southeast Asian is you recognize that there's no one way of being Southeast Asian. Like the maritime Southeast Asians have different priorities from the landlocked ones. They have a different idea of how technology looks like from the landlocked folks. We also have like each country has got a very different set of histories. Like Malaysia and Singapore are very closely tied to each other by dint of our geography. And it's like very similar.
It's still very different.
It's still different, because they're an island nation, we are a peninsula, and now we've also got like, you know, a couple of states in Borneo. And our history is very different from Indonesia. Our history is like very different from Thailand. Our aesthetic, if you look at it from a distance, they can look similar, but when you just like if you kind of like are keyed into, you know, the different things,
like subtle differences,
and it's sometimes not even subtle anymore. Like it's just smacking you in the face. It's like, yes, this is actually Thai, and this is actually like Balinese, you know, and like the way to grapple with that is by taking in different viewpoints, and that's why an anthology is such a great vehicle to kind of like attempt to encapsulate what Steampunk Southeast Asia could be. And I would say like the book itself has had an impact in that people are still reading it, and it came out in what, 2016?
Actually old now.
Let's see, this edition of yours
is 2000.
It says copyright 2015. And that is the Rosarian version, and that actually has Southeast Asian publication history of its own. And it's distributed in Southeast Asia through a different publisher. Because it was interesting enough to be taken on within Southeast Asia.
I think it's still being sold in Direct Badaya.
It is,
it's still being sold.
And
I think from my point of view is that I'm cautiously optimistic. I think there is an impact because Bill was telling me that this book is much needed. It's because he met people who actually cried at the table that, you know, they saw themselves in the book, like Vietnamese or people of Vietnamese descent seeing themselves, and they're literally crying because they felt seen, they felt represented, like presented. So this is needed. I mean, I think we still have an impact of somewhat. I mean, this book is read in the book club 3 times or 2 times.
This is the 3rd time.
that time. So I mean, it's still ongoing. I mean, the conversation, the dialogue, the thinking is still ongoing.
I mean, people are still getting something out of the book.
Yes, representation is so important,
And
yeah,
that is very important.
yeah.
And certainly representation is not the end of the conversation, and it's not the end point of pushing, but you did do a beautiful job in this book, as you say, of representing not just one specific point of view of what Southeast Asia is, but a much more broad perspective, which I think is one of its strengths. At the time that you published this book originally, there was more of a conversation happening in steampunk. We had your blog, Silver Goggles. We had Beyond Victoriana from Diana Foe. We had more people sort of opening up this dialogue and pushing for it. I do think there was pushback at the time, sometimes very extreme pushback, sometimes more mild, like people being just discomforted, as people sometimes are when you point out that there's a problem. They can get defensive, even if you're just, pointing out this is an issue. I'm not attacking you. People can still get into that mindset. There's been a drop off, and I think it's understandable. People move on, they move into different interests, they find different areas to work in that are more receptive or that work better for them in that moment. But you really were trailblazers at the time, pushing that conversation forward. And at this moment, there's still a need for more representation in steampunk, absolutely. But we do have wonderful authors like P. Jelly Clark, who are writing from his experience and from the experience of his family history and his academic work. Is this a thing that you were hoping to see going forward in steampunk? Authors like P. Jelly Clark coming forward, do you look at his work and go, oh yeah, this is the kind of steampunk I want to be reading? Jaymee, you have every right to be a pessimist, but do you get like excited when you see?
Yeah, no, actually, Jelly was actually already at the time that we were active. Jelly was already actually like blogging about his history, PhD, and his thoughts about it. And so I was reading his stuff, and I was just like, I fully expect him to get published at some point. So when he did come out with his Cairo steampunk stuff, I was just like, yes, of course he did. Of course. Not to mention, especially since we had Diana Foe at Tor. And so she was very instrumental in bringing him to the forefront there, which is really important. Yeah.
At that time when Diana was at Tor, I feel like it was just the pinnacle of steampunk and what steampunk could be. I would be honored to have her on as a guest sometime, but she's really responsible for so much great steampunk being published. And to everyone who's never read Beyond Victoriana, she hasn't published at that blog in a while, but I highly recommend it to you. So as we are moving in, because I could, of course, monopolize your time all morning. And so I'm so smitten that I can't even perform my character. I just have to be in this moment with you. So yes, Bill, and then that happened. I know. I have
laid off a lot of people.
Yeah. But what do you have? Do you have anything coming up, and where could people find out about your current and upcoming projects?
You have many things. I actually do not. Right? I publish at most like 1 or 2 short stories per year, if even that. And then this one is just like, oh, I have this new contract. Oh, I have this new story thing. Oh, I have RPG coming up. Oh, I have this new anthology project coming up. Blah, 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 blah. Yeah, like for example, she has this, and then she has this, and then she has. This is also yours. Is this also yours?
No, that's not. This mine.
Yeah.
This
Beautiful.
Fire Heart is a young adult fiction fantasy under scholastics, and this Dragon Physician, which is today's is actually Dragon Physician's 4th birthday. Yeah, it's like dragons and stuff. So I have many books. I have a lot of things. I've for people who have known me beyond like my steampunk stuff, I also write about werewolves a lot.
Yes.
Like,
she's still writing about werewolves.
I'm still writing about werewolves,
specifically in space, but also specifically like in Singapore.
Yeah, werewolves in Singapore and werewolves in space.
Sometimes it's Singaporean werewolves in space.
They're all
very specific.
Very specific. And I'm also studying the Southeast Asian science fiction in print. Don't ask me why.
Because she always wants more work.
Respect. I also like to have more work. You have a Patreon. Joyce, it's a great Patreon. To those of you who enjoy Joyce's work,
I recommend it to
yeah.
Too.
Yes. And there's lots of wonderful things to read. Of course, you just showed a couple, but Starfang and your other older works are there as well. So there's a great back catalog to enjoy.
A lot.
Yes, fantastic works. And Jaymee, you may be a couple of short stories, but you're also working for Tachyon.
Yeah, I do. So I've got, let's see. This year there were 2 debut novels that came out that I edited. These Fragile Graces, This Fugitive Heart, These Fragile Graces by Izzy Wasserstein, which is a cyberpunk noir thriller featuring a trans protagonist and the idea of clones of their cis version. And it also thinks through anarchist communities and what security and safety looks like in anarchist communities, which are trying to be as open and as inclusive as possible to people in need. And just what month is it? It's still May. Okay, just last month in April, we released The Wings Upon Her Back by Samantha Mills, which is this incredible dual timeline novel of that is set in the city-state where there are 5 sects, and the leading sect right now is the Mecha sect, which they're basically like these people with mechanical wings, and they are actually in charge of security, and they are soldiers. So it's an examination of what happens when someone who is power hungry and also very anxious about control starts taking over the city-state. And it's told in 2 timelines of like first the main character as she's growing up and witnessing the rise of this fascist. And then now as an adult taking down the same fascist that she worked for like almost 30-something years. It's told very compellingly with like interspersed with these musings of what it means to be a city, of what is the identity of a city, and also with all these little epithets that are like little windows into the history of their religion and their city-state, and mirroring what's happening, in the now, because cycles of like fascism rising and falling, tend to happen again. And so, and so like she has all these like small little tidbits that imply, this has happened again and this will happen again. And, it is on us to look through, to think through what we are seeing and to identify those red flags, and react accordingly in order to, reduce harm. So those are 2 books that I edited that came out this year. I also am part of an upcoming anthology that is being edited by Annalee Nivitz, Malka Older, and Karen Lord. It is called We Will Rise Again, and it's all stories about revolution. Revolution. Yeah. And I have a story in it in which a country's parliamentary assembly is being attacked by harpies. It's told from the perspective of the wizardess who called down the harpies, who is actually a princess of the kingdom, and she's being locked out of power by a power-hungry sibling. And she's like, that will not stand. That is not how our country works. because this is me thinking through what does a country look like when it looks feudal on the surface, but yeah, like its king is actually determined not by lineage but by competency. Meritocracy. Not even just meritocracy. It is like by competency. Like, are you capable of actually doing this job? And like, is everyone happy with what you've done so far? And like, if you are a prince and you're uninterested in the throne, then like you may well be out of the running. You know, like she's got a brother who's like a snail researcher, and everyone's like, yeah, if you're a snail researcher, you're probably not great at administration. Let's not. And it's set in a country that I invented for a romance fantasy novel, a transmigration novel where a girl from our world like kind of wakes up and wakes up in the body of a side character in her favorite murder mystery serial. And from there she discovers like actually like this story, which on the surface looks like, you know, this very gender stifled Victoriana setting, is actually like much more like interesting and much more open and free than what she initially thought. And like things that she takes for granted to be like normal in terms of gender are like completely upended here. And it's not just in this one country, but it seems to be across the board for the entire world. And so that was kind of like my take on. I'm very interested in problems of utopia right now, and I'm very interested in like what does it mean to demand better from your governments and from your kings and queens. What does it mean to have like, you know, people of all genders like entrenched in power, and like to how do power dynamics change? Because you're not going to have people getting married for money, or you're going to have different people getting married for money, and the political machinations are going to look slightly different. So that's kind of like a book that I'm currently querying, and I may just self-publish it at some point. I don't know. We'll see. And last year I had a short story come out, which I went back to monster fucking. And it's a story about a woman who meets a lady in the woods that is most likely some sort of ghost, local monster. It is in an anthology called Adventures in Bodily Autonomy. Yeah. Yeah, it is related to it's not related to wormwood. It's like it. Just like it, yeah. She's referring to the Freedom of the Shifting Sea, which is in New Suns. Original stories by original speculative fiction by color. And it is I call it my bobbit worm mermaid, my lesbian bobbit worm mermaid pornographic triptych. And so I was just like, well, that was like peak monster fucking for me. I would like to see more, and so I wrote like kind of like another story which has more monster fucking. So that comes out in Adventures in Bodily Autonomy. That is being published by Aqueduct Press. It's actually already out. Okay. And all proceeds from the sale of this anthology, Adventures in Bodily Autonomy, go to NARAL Pro Choice America.
That's wonderful. Oh my gosh.
I
want to read all of
it. My entire bibliography is on my website, jaymego.com. I try to keep it as updated as often as possible. She should keep her website as updated as possible. Update mine as well. I'm gonna babysit her today to make sure she updates it.
Excellent. Well, we have one of our members here today. Robert has to kick off soon, and he shared a very nice comment in the chat, and so I wanted to give him an opportunity if he'd like to share a favorite thing from the book and ask you all a question before he leaves. Are you still here with us?
Yes, I am still here. And again, thank you very much for the anthology, and I do appreciate the representation. I'm one of the few Asian steampunks in my group. And actually, my persona, as you can tell, is Scottish. So I'll keep you from doing my really bad Scottish accent. But anyway, I did enjoy the different take on steampunk with the Southeast Asian. And yes, I did get the title of the book, the SEA Southeast Asian. I did get that. So it was not lost on anyone. So but I did like the difference of the Western steampunk versions as opposed to the Southeast Asian steampunk versions. I actually have I guess it's shameless plug time, but I do have a podcast and a horror movie podcast, and we talk about the difference between Asian horror as opposed to Western horror, and there's a big difference. And
Yes.
so without getting much into that, I would like to say that I did appreciate the different slant on the stories. And like I posted in the chat, I'm glad that a lot of the language, especially the Tagalog stuff, the Filipino stuff, was not translated verbatim. I I was I was smiling when I read that because it's like, thank you for not translating that. I understand it, and I know very little Tagalog because my parents didn't teach me, but there was enough of it that I know, and especially the first one that I read was The Last Aswang, because we talked a lot about
Aswang. Yeah, that was one of the first ones we accepted. Yeah, I was like, oh no, we need to get this done.
Yeah. And so that was the first one that I read, and it was a neat slant on stuff that I grew up as a kid with the mythology of the Philippines. And so I really appreciated that, and I hope to see more of it. So thank you very much.
Yeah, we hope so too. I was actually I was looking in the book for one of the short stories, because one of the short stories, I believe it's Chasing Volcanoes,
Yes.
where the author Marla Angwe had written, she had invented this airship, that's of course like, crewed by Filipinos. And she had a word in it that was a neologism called plexiglass. And I was just like, do you have another word for plexiglass that is not, because plexiglass is a very English word, right? It is a combination of two English words. And do you have a Filipino equivalent? And she kind of like hem and hawed about it, and because she had never really thought about it that way. And I was just like, no, you have to think about it differently. Like, because this is set in the Philippines. You don't even have, like, we don't have a history of like the Americans colonizing you guys yet. You're still at best colonized by the Spanish, if anything. And I think there's like pushback against that. And so she kind of like thought through and came up with a whole new word that is a combination of two Tagalog words. And I was like very, very pleased with that change. And I think that like changed the entire tenor of the story, in fact. And I feel like that's why like I have a fixation on like language and words, because like that is going to make a difference in like rooting a story in a particular place at a particular time as well. Yeah. So yeah, thank you for your comment about that. Yeah, we did have many more. I think half our submissions came from the Philippines. Yeah, like Filipino science fiction in general is thriving, is flourishing. Like the Manila spec fic scene is incredible. We've got a lot of great writers coming out of there.
Yeah, the one story that I did like also, which was not Filipino, but the one about the mechanic or the put together spider that was fighting. I thought that was kind of a neat spin on more, instead of industrial gears and metal stuff, more biological biological steampunk engineering, and that was kind of cool too.
Yeah, and also it's like a take on like fighting spiders when you're a kid, right? Yeah. Like, I don't know if anybody else did that, but like we would go out and we would catch spiders and then we put them in a matchbox and we have them fight each other.
I don't like spiders, so but I enjoyed the story.
Yeah, and that's the other thing too about like we realized at some point, like, steampunk cannot just be about industrial mechanical things. Yeah, it just has to incorporate other things. Yeah, it has to be quite biological as well. I mean, we also see that in some Western works, like Scott Westerfeld's Clankers versus Darwinists in his Leviathan series, where Britain has got Charles Darwin, and Charles Darwin has like theorized DNA to the point where like genetic engineering and therefore biological engineering is the thrust of English technology versus the rest of Europe, which are still using like industrial metal robots. And they're not presented as like, one is superior as the other. They're just completely different kinds of technologies that do the same thing, which is like fight and kill other people. And so we like Robert Liao's story because it goes very much about like, you're not using this technology to fight and kill other people, but you're using it just as a childhood game. It's just like, like as children, like children too have the capacity to play with technology. And that is that's a categorical good, is for children to own their world through the technology that they have, and to play games, on their own terms with that technology. Yeah.
As an add-on to that, one of the things I love about so many of these stories is that they aren't about war. They're not about colonizing spaces. They're about, experiencing the world and traveling through it. So I'm very enchanted with so many of the stories, but Life Under Glass is such a beautiful experience of like going out and taking back there and sharing the world with people. But everyone, thank you, Robert, for your wonderful question. I'm glad we could get you in before you had to depart. I hope you will come back and join us in the future. And now we're going to dive into everybody. And so excited. So I'm going to change our view a little bit. Hello, everybody. And I'm so happy you can all be with us today. Clearly, I am Madame Askew's evil cousin, Jocelyn, today, and she has been kicked out. So, Kelsey, hello, my friend. Kelsey is also an author. And Kelsey, would you share one of your favorite stories from the collection and a thing you liked about it? And then if you have a question for Joyce and Jaymee, we would love to have that.
Oh my gosh, I think Working Woman might be my favorite take on Frankenstein ever. That was the most beautiful gut punching. I read so much Frankenstein because it's one of my absolute favorites, but like that was amazing. I hope that author.
Not the only one who said it. Like I feel like Working Woman is the one story that has had the most impact, most requests for translation into other languages. Yeah, like I've had like a French guy try very desperately to get in touch with Olivia, someone from I think Brazil, like. Yeah, that's when people want to translate a word, it's always Working Woman somehow.
I can see that. I love that the names weren't translated. Like Monty was talking about. Like I think that I don't mind working harder if it's something I don't know. And throughout the anthology, I can see embarrassing gaps in like just general knowledge. But Working Woman, I thought it was so interesting the way that the three main characters were brought together, and I thought that was beautifully done, and the almost casual carelessness of the British scientist who's like, oh, we'll just do it again, and it's just like, no, we're not doing that again. I thought that was gorgeous. You were talking about in the beginning about other anthologies and stuff that you've done. Whenever you come up with your themes and stuff, do you just look for what you're missing, or do you just think about, oh, this would be fun to do, let's do this and see what sticks? Like I'm always curious about like the process of putting together your anthologies. I've been in a couple, but they've been more casual affairs. This was beautifully done.
For the series hours, it was definitely we have this empty space and we should fill it. We should fill it, and just like fit ourselves in that hole. And I've done the other anthologies I've done were also like I did a steampunk. I edited a steampunk Shakespeare anthology, and that was really just throwing it out there. Like, wouldn't it be fun if we just did like a steampunk treatment of Shakespeare stories? And like, because I'm not a theater person, I shall like, I would like to do an anthology of it. And another friend of mine was just like, that sounds like a great idea. Let's do it in my press. I was like, okay, cool. And I think you can't find it anymore because his press went out of business. And we only had that one printing. We still have the collection, floating around, and like if you go to some libraries you can probably find it, but it is a little hard to find. We haven't printed any new copies, but it is the omnibus of Dr. Bill Shakes and the magnificent ionic pentatetrameter if you are looking for it. And for that one it was like definite when we're taking in submissions, it was definitely like, oh, we have, let's look at what we have and see that also, like, let's see what sticks. And it ended up being like, oh, there's a very particular vision of steampunk that I want to have, particularly when it comes to adaptation of Shakespeare, which was not just, we have to do Shakespeare with steampunk, but we have to do Shakespeare, we have to steampunk Shakespeare in such a way that it's not just throwing gears at the concept. Like because like the techno fantasy and retrofuturism of steampunk is really important. How does that change how we interpret Shakespeare, like King Lear? And so King Lear, like there was a treatment of King Lear, and they had airships, and like the daughters were not just like good at flattering their father, but they were like in themselves like very capable military leaders, very interested in like advancing the science of the country, which led to like a huge civil war and on this much more devastating scale. We had a treatment, I think, of like one of the King Henry stories, which was taken in as like an Abraham Lincoln kind of like taken in like yeah, I think so. But anyways, it was super fun. And the third anthology I've done was the Wisconsin Chronicles, which is kind of like a thinking through different themes that we talk about at WisCon, which is a feminist science fiction convention in Wisconsin. I themed my project Trials by Whiteness. And that was in response to specific conversations that were happening at the convention. So, which is kind of like how the Seas Hours was conceived, is in response to a kind of, or lack thereof, conversation happening, in steampunk at the time. So different editors have like, some editors are just like, yes, I have this fun concept, let's see what happens, and let's see what people come up with, and we'll go with that. But for this one, we had a very specific vision of like, we wanted it to be predominantly Southeast Asian. We only have one white author in this entire book, and I was like, yeah, we can have one token white woman. Like, why not? Why not? And we also wanted to showcase like Southeast Asian artists at that time. So we just asked a whole bunch of artists, like, hey, you want to be part of this project? And they were really happy to join us. And one of them came in like super last minute and had to do a pinch hit on a couple of the pieces. And that was like that's kind of how we approached this particular project. Was we want to have a multiplicity of voices on how this region would do this thing. It's also a response to some of the conversations we had. And we did want to make sure that Southeast Asian voices were heard and were made visible. So in a way, it's like a diversity anthology, where I was like, no white people, and we didn't say no white people, but like it was, we were very actively encouraging Southeast Asians to submit, which is like one of the things that you kind of have to do. And still have to do with anthologies, where like if you don't specifically say that you're looking for certain voices, those voices will assume that they will not be included. Self-rejection is such a huge thing, right? Like you're just like, oh well, I'll never get into the anthology, why should I even try? And then they stop themselves there. So they won't even start drafting the thing. They should, like, so You just have to keep writing and just keep submitting, regardless of like what marginalization you have. And in fact, because of the marginalization that you have, I would say.
And it's also the specials we have in Strange Horizons. I was the one who suggested having Southeast Asian special and the Asia special. And it's like, it's very specific as well. So it's all open to Southeast Asian or POC. So it's like, we are very clear when it comes to like, we want to see such voices and please apply. Please do not self-reject. So it's all very targeted sometimes. It's just
you do have to have like targeted
very targeted
calls.
like targeted calls.
And you do have to really dip into the network to get to those folks. Because otherwise you're just gonna have the same people submitting over and over again.
And it's just it gets boring after a while.
But anyways, being the Strange Horizons nonfiction editor is one of Joyce's many hats. And so you should read Strange Horizons and the nonfiction columns.
And I'm mostly at articles, but I wrangle most of them.
She's tried to wrangle me into writing nonfiction as well. Like
Read Trials of Whiteness by her. It's like
it was not.
She has a
I
stop.
did like a couple, and then I was just like, you know what? I don't want to talk about white. I don't. I did read 2 or 3. And then I had to stop because I was just like, oh, this is so depressing. I don't want to think about it anymore right now. I'll come back to it. I'll come back to it eventually. I'll come back to it eventually when I figure out the whole concept. But for now, I'm just like, let's focus on what it is I want to do, which is Utopia. So I feel like that answer went all over the place. Like, did that answer your question at all?
Kelsey, thank you for that great question. And thank you, Joyce and Jaymee, for the wonderful response to that. It was really cool. So Karen, you're up next, but before I call on you, give you a moment to collect yourself, my darling friend. The airship ambassador had to duck out. He was being bombarded by other foreign diplomats coming to his door unexpectedly, maybe to talk about his grass. I don't know. However, he left me with a question for both of you. And he would like to know what would be needed from both of you, for the community, and from publishers and readers to create more of these stories. He feels that more than ever, we really need to see this kind of writing and this kind of challenge to the status quo and this kind of representation in stories. So what would you need to create another anthology like this?
Money.
I'm
very much ready to do that. Give me money. And you know, like give us a publisher, give us a production manager. Well, I guess I could have no production manager.
But give us a publisher who understands the need to have representation, and diversity in first place.
And the money. Money at this point. And like, hopefully an international distributor, because that's going to be a huge part of it, is the international distribution. Because like a lot of our authors were based in Southeast Asia, and they had no way of getting books to sell out to them without paying exorbitant costs. Like, for example, like this is the Rosarium published version. And like, how much is it on your side of the planet? What, $19, $15?
Something like that.
Times that, like in Malaysian ringgit, times that by 4.
Holy crap.
And then add more import duties on top of that. And that's how much, like it is $69
for one book
at 63 ringgit at Kinokuniya, which is like where we get most of our international books. And like, that's really expensive. And I can get a lot of plates of chicken rice with that money. So we do have a local publisher who does local distribution, and they sell for like 25 ringgit. Which is like a third of the price buying it from an international distributor like
you don't have either,
Wow.
Ebooks also can be that high.
Yeah.
And it also depends on which publisher you're buying from. We don't do a lot of ebooks on this side of the planet, unfortunately.
Yeah.
There's a lot of publishers are like, why would we do that?
And they always say there will be piracy, and then
which is like, sure, why not? Like, let the pirates have it if it means getting our work out there. Like
this one is supposed to have like an ebook, but that's piracy. I'm like,
yeah, which is like, you know where most of the pirates are? Most of the pirates are in America, so we're not even worried about that. You know, we just have like a thing in there, like, if you're pirating this book, come and you liked it, come and buy it, actually buy it, which would be great. So yeah, it's like the price point is really high for Southeast Asia.
Very high.
And so we would need a publisher who understands that and is prepared to either sell the rights to someone more local or prepared to like take a creative approach to getting it printed and distributed locally. And it doesn't even have to be in Malaysia or Singapore. It can be in any of the local countries, as long as they have some distribution.
Yeah.
So yeah, that would be that is a nice to have. Like the must is obviously the money. I mean, it's like it was a lot of work editing this.
Yeah.
It was a lot of like there was a lot of like doubts of whether or not this was a good story, whether or not it would like how we would write it, how we would edit it in a way that that the Western audience could read it and how they would look at it. We had some reviews where people were like, "Oh, this is not steampunk." We had a lot of people saying, "Oh, this is not really a steampunk book," and I'm like, "What do you mean it's not a steampunk book?"
It says on the.
Not only that, but like I am a steampunk scholar. I know what the fuck I'm on, you know. And it's like, it's just not steampunk to you because you have this particular idea of what steampunk is.
It's not thing again. It's like,
and it's just part of why the fact that it's a subgenre. So it's not like people are not digging into the nuances of steampunk as it currently is, right? With the ways it has been taken up. So there is an assumption of how steampunk stories should go and should look like.
Yeah.
And so these stories don't tend to look like that. And so that's why we get these reviews that are like, this is not steampunk enough. Although we did have that one-star rating, which I thought was the best rating because it was clearly this white woman who said like, oh, I once used to live in Southeast Asia and I was looking forward to like being back again, but I found it so cold and uninviting. I'm like, that's right, because you were here as a colonizer. That's why, and I was just like, you know what? I think we did it right. We did it right with that.
Yeah.
But we need to have a publisher who is going to be okay with that kind of criticism. And so we need a publisher who is willing to take that kind of risk.
Yeah.
Not a publisher who like wants to make everyone happy, because you're never going to make everyone happy. Yeah. But yeah, that's what we would take to have us do this project again.
A small request. I will tell Kevin he has a job. He needs to do it. Yeah.
Yes.
He's not here, so I can say that.
Yeah.
All right, Karen.
Please relay our words to the ambassador.
Yes.
That we would like funding.
Yes, funding first, please. All right, Karen. Karen is another author friend from Australia. Hello, Karen. I know it's very early for Karen too. I think it's earlier for you all, but
I woke up at 10 to 9 because I've had a migraine for 3 days and went, I'm late.
No, you're here.
Facebook told me it started at 8:30, so I thought it was late, and then Bill said no, it's just started, so I jumped on. I've had my breakfast and I'm having my wake up cup of tea. Yeah, because I've had a migraine for a couple of days, I haven't had my chance to do my usual research to ask a question and stuff. And then I thought of some questions and everyone's already asked them. So I have got my Frankenstein t-shirt on for you there, Kelsey. So I thought I'd do, I usually try to ask a writing question, but they have sort of been, I was going to ask about anthology versus full novel, but you sort of asked that. So I'll come up with what made you decide to do it steampunk rather than another genre?
Oh, we were just in steampunk at
I
the
might have
time.
missed something at the beginning, so hopefully I didn't.
We're gonna into steampunk.
Was there a conscious decision?
Yeah, and so
Did you have a conscious decision to choose steampunk, or you really love steampunk and wanted to do that anyway, or did you think that would be the best genre, or yeah?
No, we just, the conscious decision was we should set it in Southeast Asia. Because we were already doing steampunk stuff and we were already talking about steampunk and we were already pretty immersed in steampunk as a space, as a subgenre, as an aesthetic. And we're like, you know what, we haven't seen a Southeast Asian book project at that time. Yeah, we had not seen, like we had seen we had seen individual short stories in anthologies and in magazines here and there, but they're all very disparate. There was no cohesively, specifically Southeast Asian steampunk project at that time, and that's why we decided to do it. Just, you know, and also because we could at that time. We were just bantering about it, and then suddenly here came an opportunity, and we just, you know, like strike when the iron is hot. Jump in when the airship is still docked.
Like 2 years we had languishing, right? We waited for it.
Yeah, I think we kind of like pitched it about. We were kicking around the idea 2012, 2013. Like I had just started my PhD. I hadn't even started my dissertation at that time. And the opportunity really only came out in like 2014 or so, late 2013 when Bill came to us with the offer. We didn't even know how to go about doing, like, pitching the concept to publishers. Because first you have the niche of steampunk, and at that time people were already saying, oh, steampunk is dying around 2013 or so. So there was already kind of like a lack of interest in the concept by the major publishers. So that was that. And then the other niche is Southeast Asian literature, which like mostly at the time was either individual authors coming up with like either novels or short stories in all these disparate places, or like an Asian American like literature kind of take on it, where it's like you're looking at it as Southeast Asian literature, and it tend to be more like literary fiction, more realist or magical. The closest we got to speculative fiction was like magical realism, particularly the Filipinos, because the Filipinos have, like, they draw on the Spanish magical realist tradition, which means that they have really wonderful writing, and they are way ahead of us because of that. But no, like, specifically Southeast Asian, like, there was Southeast Asian speculative fiction, but they tended to be national. National. Right? So like, we have a Malaysian cyberpunk anthology, for example. We have the Philippines, they have the Philippine Specfic annuals.
For us, we have Fish Eats Lion. We have Longta. We have Ayam Curtain. And
and those were like, those are individual book projects. They're not like, they're not, and also Singaporean specifically. Longta tries to be like Southeast Asian generally, but Longta is also like headed by a white guy. So we're like not comfortable with that. Because we're like, if it's a Southeast Asian anthology project, it should be headed by Southeast Asians. Like that just seems reasonable, right? Are we crazy? I don't know. And of course, you know, as being us at the time, we're like, clearly we are qualified because we're not thinking about self-rejecting ourselves. And you know, like, you also have to take on the confidence of mediocre white men. And therefore we decided to like put ourselves forward, because why not? Like, if the question is why, you also ask why not. Like, the pros and cons, you want to weigh them. And for us, like, the pros of doing specifically Southeast Asian steampunk project were like very high. You know, also because top of that list, it's gonna be fun, and it was totally fun.
It's fun. I mean, we have so many submissions we have to reject. I mean, there were some really good submissions. And some of them were like, they were good and they were by Southeast Asians, but they were not steampunk. And I was like, why?
close, but not close. We would like to encourage you to submit to all these magazines. They are friends of ours. Please send them along. Yeah. You know, so that was also another opportunity for us to be like, you're super talented. You know, we'll consider you for another project, but for this story, send it to XYZ project. Yeah. And whether or not they did get sent along, we don't know. I suspect not. But like, and those authors also went on to like write other really cool stuff and have like other careers in speculative fiction. So not all was lost, not all was lost. Not all. Yeah. And so that's kind of like that's the gist of our answer.
Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you. All right, Terry, you were here bright and early. Welcome, Terry. Terry is a retired librarian and a wonderful reader. We love our librarians. Terry, did you have a favorite story from the collection?
I am still reading the collection because I don't have it in ebook form. So when I need to look up a word, I have to put it down and get a dictionary. On my ebook, I can just touch it and it tells me. So it's taking me longer than usual, but I'm enjoying it very much. So far, my favorite is Chasing Volcanoes.
Yeah, that's fun.
Yeah. It's just it's a complete adventure. I really like it. And the ending is inclusive.
Yeah.
The question I have, you may have just answered, but it's how did you decide which stories went in this one? Did you have like a hard criteria you got to check off, or just a general feeling? And I do love the way there's many myths and folklores incorporated in. So that's very visible.
Okay. I know you kind of went by vibes.
I went by vibes.
Joyce goes by vibes a lot. Joyce is the very like id kind of editor.
Yeah.
I'm more of the super ego kind of theoretical editor. And then the three of us, we have the ego, the conscious editor. Yeah. So Joyce went by vibes, and I went by a very specific definition of steampunk that I was working with at that time. Let me see if I can remember it. Which is one, it has to have alternate history, and it has to be like really like I wanted the John Bar hinge like unhinged, like really like turned on its head, like no. Oh, but what if Queen Victoria was a robot? Like, no, like, what if Queen Victoria didn't exist at all? Like, that kind of, John Bar hinge. Unhinged. Like, unhinged. Like, you should not be able, like, if you recognize the history, it's because you are from the region and not because you have an inkling of how history was supposed to go, and therefore you are looking for Easter eggs. Of like, oh yes, this thing really did happen. I mean, there were like Easter eggs like that, but it should have been like a very localized history that wouldn't be found in average history books that are more Eurocentric. So that was one. The other was we were looking for techno fantasy. Well, I was looking for techno fantasy, which is like fantastical technology, one, or like really like the kind of technology that wouldn't be possible except by certain means. So you have a wide range of technology when you have a definition like that. You could have like very realistic technology, like the little fighting spiders or the airships. It's like those are known technologies to us. But then you could have like the incredibly like weird, locally specific biotechnology, like in the Lhasa swamp. Or the airships where it's like real, like the crystals and everything. Which is like they were interdimensional, basically. Yeah. It's like, when Dora like pitched us, she's like, I want to write about the Vietnamese boat people, but like interdimensional. I'm like, oh, that sounds like fun. Yeah, write it and let's have a look. And then like the last one is, and this one kind of like it's how do I say? It's not always present. It's because it's really hard to depict. But it is like for me kind of important because like the third aspect of steampunk that's important to me is that there is an industrial revolution that is either happening or it is incipient, about to happen. An incipient industrial revolution where the effects are starting to be felt. And we are starting to see more of that, but it is not quite seen in full swing. If it is in full swing, then it is like completely different from how we imagine industrial revolution to look like. And I think about industrial revolutions a lot because like we usually think of like the industrial revolution, the 19th century industrial revolution with the trains, with the airship, like with because we suddenly had access to all the materials necessary for industrialization. And I didn't want us to go the pre-industrial route because I feel like you don't get the same kind of the development of mass technology does not happen without a certain amount of industrialization. But I did also want to kind of like encourage people to think through what does industrialization mean at all different levels of society? Because like industrialization is gonna look different to someone who's out in the sticks versus right in the city, right? It's going to impact them in a different way. It might improve their lives, but make it worse in a different way. It might improve the lives of the people in the city in a different way. And cause like devastation. Yeah. Right. And like you should be able to see that starting to happen and kind of like predict that. And in a way, that was what drew me to steampunk is like we could, if we wanted, like instead of, you know, kind of picking through the devastation of like the post-apocalypse because we already know how that narrative is going to go. What if you had a narrative where you picked that out before it happened so that you can either stave it off or you can change the narrative entirely. Because like the signs tend to be there and we know what the signs are because we've already lived through it. And steampunk as an alternate history, you know, subgenre seemed to be a very, very useful vehicle for telling stories where people notice those signs before they come to pass.
Did you argue about any of the ones that got finalized?
Did we? I don't think we did. Yeah, we were pretty much on board. There was some that she picked out that I was just like, I don't understand what the hell's going on in here. As I said, I was looking by vibe. Yeah, like Life Under Glass actually was one of them where I was just like, I don't understand what's going on in this story. But you read through it. No, I did read through it, and I didn't understand what was going on in it. So I was like,
arguing now.
You know, and so I said to Joyce, I was like, can you be the one to send the editorial feedback to Joyce? So Joyce did. And so when we got back the revised story, I was like, oh, I see what the story is now. You know, because like Joyce had the vision for the story. And this ties into like, you know, how editing and writing like are like they go hand in hand, where like the editor like the writer has a thing going on, but then the editor's like, no, I think we require some clarity of vision here. Let me give you my feedback. And you know, and then like the story comes back and it's much clearer. It's more refined. Yeah, it's like, so that's what happened with like, you know, with Life Under Glass, where I totally did, but Joyce I saw it. Yeah, like, Joyce understood what the story was about. I did not. So I read it. I was like, oh, so that's what it was. Oh, you know, so yeah, that's kind of like how our different editorial processes went, which I think like makes for a much more interesting project, honestly. And even today, where when I'm reading for Tachyon, I'll be like, I like the story. I get my vibes that this is a good story. I don't understand what the hell's going on in it. And therefore I have no editorial vision for how I would edit it. And therefore I must let it go to some other editor who has an editorial vision for it. Because I can see that there are problems that I don't know how to fix. And therefore it is much better off in the hands of a different editor. So like if you get rejected and your work is like, it is good, but like an editor doesn't get your work, like you don't want to work with that editor anyway, and that editor will be very happy to see you work with another editor who can actually make that story stronger. Because it is terrible if like an editor and writer get together and the editor don't know what to do with the work, and the work ends up being even more murky, and that's not what you want happening with your work. It's much better to just like, just be like, let's find someone who has a clearer vision. And that kind of veered into writing. But our editing processes were very different. I'm making a quadro amoroso, which I'm not sure you've hit yet. It was another one of those like, I don't understand what's going on in this story. Like, but Joyce says it's good, so I'm gonna trust that.
Okay. Thank you.
Part of the stories.
Okay, I'm gonna be up all night finishing.
Yeah, I finally understood what Quadro Amoroso was when I actually like started proofreading it. This is what's happening. It's all, and it's very poetical, and I'm not great with poetry because I'm not good with facts. But it is like once you understand what Quadro Amoroso is, it just it's beautiful. I see the chandelier for what it is. I'm not just entrenched and like distracted by all the sparklies and try to apprehend the sparkly one sparkle by one sparkle. I see it as a whole. And so that's kind of like how it went with Quadro Amoroso. It's like,
wonderful.
Other stories, I'm just like, oh yeah, I can kind of like see the general thrust of it. Then there were the stories that got away. Yeah, there was a few couple of songs that we were like, oh my god, we need to have it. No, and we couldn't. Yeah, because they got sold to somewhere else. Or they didn't fit the anthology anyway. Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much. I was just curious, and it's a stronger work, I believe, because of that back and forth between you.
Yes.
Thank you, Terry.
It's definitely more fun that way. Yeah, thank you for your question, though.
And thank you. That was a wonderful response to that. Again, you're giving us so much beautiful information. I'm just like not having to do much work as an interviewer. So
ins and outs of like editing and it's fun and it's fun.
Alicia stitching away in the background, giggling. I've seen you laugh numerous times. So now you have to pay the piper. What was one of your favorite stories? And do you have a question for Joyce and Jaymee?
I have the last story yet to read. I think it's interesting because for the unmaking of Corrado Hermoso, I was reading the story going, wait, I know this. Wait, I know the Smith. Holy crap, I know the Smith. So I really like that story because I recognize it from a gaming campaign of all places.
Yeah, I had no frame of reference for it at all.
Yeah.
So I had to find a different into the story.
Yeah, it was just really interesting. I was like, I just really adored that, and I adored the contrast in the two brothers, where they're just so. The one is just so obviously Western, or trying to be Western, and the other one is just like whatever. I live here, and I loved their interplay of being the same culture and yet not.
Leslie's story, which was ordained. Yeah.
Yeah, that was really cool. What question? Oh, so how did you choose the order of the stories? Because the first one,
that's like it kind of fell into place, right? It kind of like no, it did not. I had to make a very specific trip to Singapore And we specifically ordered the library. I was like, we have to sit down, and I had like all these like small little post-it notes.
Yeah.
With like things like, oh, this story is Filipino, oh, this story is Singaporean. Oh, yeah, like the themes of the stories. And we sat down and we talked about, we had to talk it over like what the order was. Yes. So yeah, thank you for this question. This is like one of my favorite parts of putting together anthologies is trying to figure out the table of contents. And like I kind of knew this like subconsciously at the time, but like I have actually had this like confirmed for me by my boss, Jacob Weissman, that the best way to think about the anthology, the first thing you think about when you're putting together your table of contents is your strongest stories are the first and the last and one in the middle.
Yeah.
The ones that are like maybe not as strong, kind of like go in between, yeah. So we started off with like, okay, what is the story that is going to like set us off on a good note, and like gonna, really introduce the fact that this is not gonna be a typical steampunk anthology to us. And well, of course, it's gonna be the one with the giant flying catfish. Right, because it's like catfish are so specific. Flying catfish is like very particular. Like they're not like airships. But at the same time, there is like the vibe, the steampunky vibe of like wanting to learn how to control the airship, the giant catfish.
And controlled by
music, yeah. Playing a violin. She's playing a very specific local instrument,
like a flute, something like that. Yeah.
And like, and I was just like, okay, that's going to be our anchor, like our first anchor. And then we chose Paranoir Love Story, which is like this super queer, kind of like revolution story, set on the border of Thailand and I believe Laos. And like it's got these like the bugs that spy on people, and the mother and the daughter who are like both gay, but the mother like had to give up like her queer life and her queer scientist background to adhere to like conventions, and paving the way for the daughter to really spread her wings.
Yeah.
And I thought like, this is a story about families like kind of coming together and people's coming together, working together in like this very quiet revolution, the way bugs do, like bugs just encroach every part of our lives. And that's just, like that is how a lot of revolutions get seeded. And so those were our two anchor. And then after that, I was trying to figure out like, where shall we put the rest of the stories? So we have like a total like 5 Filipino stories in a 12-story anthology. And we're like, we can't just put all the Filipinos in one corner. Like that's kind of dumb. So it also looks weird and unbalanced that way. And we could have like organized it by like general region, I guess.
Yeah. Right.
But it would have looked very strange.
It will feel strange.
Yeah. And geographically kind of odd. Yeah. So we just decided to like intersperse the Filipino stories. And then after that, we just went by like thematics, and the vibes of the stories. Like, okay, what story would follow this story that it would be a seamless, transition from one side.
Or like
either a segue or a really jarring change that makes you do a 180. So it has to do one or the other. And if it does that jarring 180, then we also have to think about what is the effect of that 180, like what are we trying to say there? And after that 180, we have to have a proper segue into the next one. And that I think is one of the harder parts of curating anthologies and organizing an anthology is trying to, like, you want an anthology where, because like there are 2 different kinds of anthology readers, right? There are just those heathens that just are like, oh, I'm just gonna pick a random story and start from there and read it to completely out of order. And then there are the people who are reading it like straight from page 1 to the last page, straight through. They're not trying to read it out of order. And for those people, you want to make sure that their reading experience is as smooth as possible. Because like for like the other kind of reader, like it doesn't matter what order you're gonna put it into, they're gonna read it out of order, and it's not going to matter to them. But for the first kind of reader, like that reading experience is quite important as well. So we didn't want to discount that. And we also, and at least I was thinking about it. Yeah. And that's why I had to make Joyce sit down with me in person. Like bodily sat her down, like let's go through this, and like took our post-its and like we're just looking at this like post-it page and like it's moving and like what about this, and we just move like the post-it here and there. At first it was just Excel file. Yeah, it was an Excel file. It was not working. It was not working on an Excel sheet because we were like just move things around. We move the cells around. And we're like, no, this is not. I'm not vibing with this. I'm coming down this. I'm coming to Singapore. I'm coming back to Malaysia, and I'm coming down to Singapore, and we're gonna watch this through. Because like the stories had already been like copy edited, had been proofread, and we just needed to figure out what the order was. Yeah. So I happened to be home. And I was like, Joyce, let's sit down. Sit down with me. Let's meet at Esplanade. Let's go to the weird durian thing and go admire that was a Marina Bay Sands built at the time. I think so. Yeah. Let's go look at the weird spaceship. That is the Marina Bay Sands. And I sit down in the library and think this through. That's how we organize the table of contents. Thank you for asking that question. I love that.
That's so great. And I just have this wonderful vision of the two of you with your post-its in the library. And just
it was
wonderful.
We weren't even at a table. I think we were sitting next to a window, and we're like, we've got this book in between us, and we're like, I think you were the library. The actual library. Yeah, you're like.
That's amazing. I love that. That's a great story. Great question. Thank you, Alicia, for asking that. It was wonderful. Cindy, you are our final question and final comments. Would you please share with us one of your favorite stories, and then a question for Joyce and Jaymee?
So, like Terry, I'm used to getting my books electronically, and I didn't order the book soon enough. So I have it, and I've started it, but I haven't finished it. So I was like, well, I was on the fence about whether I was going to show up at book club or not. But then I was like, I want to know what other people's favorite stories were. So I showed up. And I like your explanation of how you ordered the book, because, now I know I'm just going to read it straight through, which I usually do anyway. But but I've done the same thing when organizing workshops. I put them all on cards with how long each workshop is, and and then I have like how many rooms I have, and then you just rearrange it until it's like people would want to go to both of these workshops, so we can't have them across from each other. Right. So my question for you is, what is your favorite story? What's that? Is that a question that you can answer? Or is that
like asking your favorite child, isn't it?
That's my favorite child. But I have like favorite children for specific things. I had Last Aswang. I like the Last Aswang. Yeah, I like Last Aswang. For its take on the Penanggalan, and also because like it's got this incredible imagery of like that climax where she's just like spreading her wings and dropping like her legs, right? Like that. And also I love Chng Lee's depiction of the Aswang. Page 55. Like when I saw it, I was just like, okay, this is an incredible, like, I feel like this is so the thing I like about Chng is the way he draws hair and like.
Oh, I love the art. I do love the art.
It's very, very like distinctive, and that's why I wanted Chng to be part of the project. I was so stoked when he agreed. I also love Paulo Chiquento's Between Severed Souls because it's kind of like the origin story of a series that he had been working of a comic series that he had been working on actually featuring this Penanggal this robotic wooden Penanggalan character. I also like the Life Under Glass. Life Under Glass is great. And has gone on to write like really cool novellas. Look out for Nuvo's work. I think one of her more recent books is basically like an Asian American take on The Great Gatsby is how I remember it being. And then of course there's Olivia Ho because of the Working Woman. Yeah, the cast of characters. It's quite strong. It's one of the few stories I like which has more than one point of view character. Because I usually don't like stories with multiple point of view characters. I find that they're very hard to juggle. So I'm not in general a fan of reading them or writing them because I don't think they're handled well. So I really love the way Olivia Ho did it. And her voices came together. Yeah. And like Olivia Ho now, I believe I think she's in the UK doing her PhD. Wow. And you should check out her Instagram because she does this thing where she dresses up like the book that she's currently reading. She's got this fashion book bookstagram where she does videos where she dresses up like she styles herself to look like the covers of the books that she's reading. It's great.
Which author is that?
Olivia
Ho.
Yeah. I forget the name of the Instagram off the top of my head. I also love Ivana Mendel's Petrified because that's a take on the Sitanggang story, which is like one of my favorite like myths, local myths of a young man who gets turned to stone after he returns from abroad. He denies his mother and his mother curses him to become stone. And so Ivana had this like really cool take on the idea where it was like actually he turns into stone for other very steampunky reasons. And she became it became like this very we worked very hard on it. So and she's not as strong a writer as most of the others at that time. I haven't seen more of her recent writing. But there is a particular storytelling voice frame to it that you don't see in the other stories. Everything is in first person told by different point of view characters who are all like, well, this thing happened. This is what I saw from this guy. It was kind of fucking strange. And so like you have to just piece together what they all saw in order to see what really happened to him and understand why he became so. Actually on Instagram. Yeah, she follows me too. I just realized that too. If you love Robert, I still love the insects. Yeah, I mean, like Paris writing is stunning. Yeah, Ken Wallach's writing is stunning. And her art is stunning as well. Yeah, they just do all this like really strange, mixed media art, that really challenges what beauty like. It's not even trying to be attractive or trying to be beautiful. In fact, it is actively trying to provoke through its ugliness. Yeah. Which I think is like just so incredible. I think it's how she writes fiction as well. Nowadays, like but back in the day, like their fiction was just like there was this poetry to their work, and how they depicted monsters and the monstrous, and queer people too, like just this beautiful, quiet beauty to their writing. So have I spoken about all of them yet? I mean, Marilla, I've already spoken of. We've spoken about the flying catfish, Consequence of Sound, and Ordained was like this really nice like duality of the same problem kind of thing, which we see quite a bit here and there. And I think we saw it in Tai Chi Zero, where we have the prodigal son who's trying to bring technology to the village, and everyone is rejecting him because they don't want technology in their village for reasons. and like the questions come out of like, do we need this technology? Do we truly need our way of life change? And how can we change? How can we adapt to modern technology in a way that doesn't compromise our ways of life, but also ensures that we go into the modern world seamlessly.
Yeah. And we see this now in like how we tackle the climate crisis.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's how the technology of the West is now impacting the ecosystem of the global South.
Yeah. And like, and you can't even ask me to like, say what's your favorite picture, what's your favorite illustration, because I love all of them.
Oh yeah. Our favorite children, all of them.
Kim Miranda has like, I think Kim Miranda started working with you on a comic,
and then she kind of left.
Yeah. But like the comic's fun. And Kim is still doing comics and art. Chng has I think a graphic novel out called The Magic Fish or something like
Magic
that.
Fish. Stephanie
is still like
working on her art.
Yeah, Stephanie is working on a new graphic novel. And Stephanie has an animation background. Stephanie and Kim have animation backgrounds, and Borg as well.
She's working with Difference Engine now, actually.
Oh, is she?
Yeah,
okay, that makes sense.
Difference Engine is a graphic
it's a graphic novel
publisher in Singapore.
Yeah. And I haven't heard from Wina Octavia in a while. She was one of our pitch hitters.
Yeah.
But yeah, her art is also like, so the way she did Petrified was like, oh, this is great vibes. I love it. Like, I'm all about vibes sometimes.
I guess the correct question was, what's your favorite aspect of each story instead of what your favorite story is?
Obviously,
seems to be what you're answering. So
it's a great.
I love your enthusiasm for the whole project, and thank you so much for doing it, because you're right. It's underrepresented, and and it was needed. So thank you.
Thank you for your great questions, Cindy. It was wonderful to have this like final discussion of all the beautiful things you liked about each story. This is such a remarkable collection of stories, not only because of the perspectives you bring and the locality of the stories, but because you brought so much passion to the stories. Each one is a gem. There is a beautiful flow in the anthology. I've read it so many times, so I'm able to keep coming back to it and learning new things from the stories, which I think is a high benchmark for any anthology. The fact that you also were breaking ground in terms of the representation at the time and challenging the sort of status quo of steampunk just elevates the work even more. But it's a beautiful piece. I'm so happy we could have you here today to talk about this anthology.
And thank you for rereading it. Really, like I'm glad that it is still being read like almost 10 years after.
Oh my God, it's 10 years?
Yeah, it's been 10 years since its first publication. And since we first pitched the project, I'm glad that people are still talking about it. We're glad that it's still getting out there. We occasionally get royalty checks, so please keep buying it and supporting it. Like when I get a royalty check, I'm like, oh, I can buy a couple of plates of chicken rice in Malaysia with this amount of money. This is how I measure like the exchange rate these days. I'm like, how many plates of chicken rice can I buy with this? And I'm just like, I'm really thrilled that people are still enjoying this and still discovering it so long after its first publication. Because like I'm more used to projects being all like, you have a first big hurrah, and then like people move on to other things and nobody revisits the book, because there's so many books coming out all the time. And they're all great books. Like there's so many great books out all the time now. And it's just so hard to like wade through them, and it's just so gratifying to see people come back and to our relatively thin book to enjoy the stories in it, and to enjoy our authors and to enjoy our artists in it. And I hope that you guys find more of their work that they've done since, because they have done quite a bit. A lot of them have done quite a bit of work since, and they just improved from our book, which is always great. Nivo has the book like three novellas now. No, yeah, 3 novellas. And they're all good, quite good. Yeah. So, yeah, if you want more like Vietnamese fantasy, like you look up Nivo. Yeah.
Wonderful. I love to check out the work of authors that I've discovered in an anthology and to track them down. I remember after your anthology came out initially, I was looking up every single author, like where are more stories this anthology is.
Yeah, and at that time, a lot of them were first published in this book. Like, the debut, like they were debut short story writers, or they just didn't have a large body of work behind them, and now they do 10 years on.
Okay.
So I'm excited that people are discovering them now, so that you can now go forth and find more of their work. Yeah.
And this is, of course, my last opportunity to remind you all to check out Jaymee and Joyce online, to follow their websites, to check out Joyce's Patreon, to follow them on social media, to keep up with their work, because you are both luminaries, not only in steampunk, but in all the genres. You bring the same sort of passion, integrity, and dedication to a high standard of work to everything you do, and it's all beautiful. So thank you for sharing your time with us at a truly atrocious time of the morning.
We are slightly more awake.
So next time we will have Jaymee and Joyce join us at Friday tea instead, so it's at a more humane hour of the day. But thank you all for joining us for book club this month. Of course, we will be back next month, and maybe Madame Askew will join us instead. Who knows? Next month, we are reading a wonderful novel from our dear friends of Queen of Swords Press. Bill, do you have the book? Do you have the details? Thank you. Death by Silver. There is I will say I don't think there's any canoodling on the page, but there's probably some references to canoodling, by the way, and some other heavy topics, but it is a wonderful story. We love the wonderful people at Queen of Swords Press. They bring us a lot of fantastic queer literature, and it turns out next month I'm also interviewing Catherine Lundoff, the editor of Queen of Swords Press, for my Sip the Tea event. So you can get like a lot of wonderful interaction there. So please come back and join us. Joyce, Jaymee, thank you so much for your time today. Best wishes on all of your writing endeavors and all of your publications. Now we just need to raise the money so you can write these hours 2, 3, 4, and 5. If we can have Steampunked 1, 2, 3, and 4 from the Vandermeers, I feel like we should get more installments from you all. So, and I love those anthologies. That was not shady. It's just that I am greedy and want more.
Yeah.
So now this is also my opportunity to tell you all to please take very good care of yourselves as you go out into the world, and remember to treasure yourselves as we treasure you, because you are irreplaceable in this world. So please wash your hands, get your boosters, drink the good tea, and do something lovely for yourself, like read a good book and leave a review of that book, because you'll feel so good and so virtuous for leaving reviews. So get out there, review the books, share. Word of mouth makes all the difference in the world. We've got multiple authors in this call today, and they will all tell you that a word of mouth recommendation from a friend to a friend is the most powerful way to sell a book. Thank you for watching. Now or later, if you have not read this anthology yet, there's still time. Books do not go bad on the shelf. You can read it at any time. So get out there and read.